Hello, everyone's Forest Focus as more Gibbs-White signs a new Nottingham Forest contract, which reportedly has no release clause or gentleman's agreement, as Evangelos Marinakis wins a battle with Spurs, which he clearly took very personally. At the end of the day, we always win, seems to be his big takeaway from it. So we'll look at our takeaways, we'll discuss what happened, what it means, and who might be added to the squad soon in the company of, first of all, Michael Temple. Temps, morning, how are you?
Morning, fellas. Feeling good, actually. I can see Gibraltar out the window, which is a bit of a novelty to say. And looking forward to chatting to you boys.
Excellent. Good to have you with us. Good to do this while you're in foreign climes. Looking forward to chatting as well with Dan Cook. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm pleased to be on an episode of the Travel Show with Michael Temple at last. So looking forward to what that throws up.
We shall see. We'll mainly focus on Morgan Gibbs-White. Obviously, we'll do a bit of transfer chat around Dan and Ndoye and James McAtee too, with a mention for one or two other players, but mostly Morgan chat. We'll start by just looking at the article that John Percy put out in the Telegraph from Portugal, where he is. Excellent in-depth stuff as ever from John. Definitely recommend checking it out. But I'll just go through some of the key points, certainly. Interestingly, he reports that he doubts Spurs ever met the terms of the release clause, which was 60 million, of course. The release clause, it says, was put in initially when Morgan signed because there was interest from Brentford and Everton. I don't remember that being reported at the time, so that's interesting. The big takeaway as well is no release clause or gentleman's agreement, as mentioned. A very quickly negotiated deal by the sound of it after Marinakis flew out on Thursday. Deal signed on Saturday. Best paid player in the club's history, as Temps discussed on our reaction show on Saturday night. Morgan's gone home to be with his partner, Brittany, who's having some complications with her pregnancy. So wish them both well. Marinakis has gone too, but Forest will turn their attentions to other signings now. Important to note as well, again, we discussed this on Saturday, that Morgan's professional behaviour during all this seems to be very good when other players are going on strike and all that kind of stuff. So Temps had his say on it, about general say about it on Saturday. I was thinking about it a bit over the weekend, making these notes. I mean, I get a lot of stuff wrong this podcast, but I got this one spectacularly wrong. I thought he would go. At one point, I thought he should go because it seemed like he wanted to go, and it felt like some bridges had been burned. And as Temp said on Saturday, football's a fickle business that transforms quickly, and it's certainly transformed rapidly. So my read on this was completely wrong. I guess, Dan, I judged it in the normal parameters of football and how it normally goes, and Nottingham Forest aren't a club that seem to operate the normal parameters of football sometimes. So I got it wrong. Did you get it wrong? What's your take on it all?
Yeah, I think I got it totally wrong. I think I was on the same lines of you, that he seemed to want not that he seemed to want the move, but you could understand why he would want the move. You could understand why it would happen that way, and it was just a case of, was there anything at all Forest could do, or were we just trying to negotiate with Spurs to get more money out of it? It didn't necessarily feel like we could negotiate with Gibbs-White, and that's partly because of how it was reported, I think on Sky, where they said that we'd already been trying to negotiate for 12 months and we'd got nowhere. So for it to all turn around like this, it feels to me like nothing really that was reported along the way adds up when it goes with another piece of information that's there. It's kind of like we're told he wouldn't talk about a deal, but now he's kind of signed a new deal all on the Saturday whilst we're playing Fulham for a pre-season game. Nothing really adds up. So I don't think we can fully believe anything along the way other than the end result, which is that he is staying for at least another season, and he probably is the highest paid guy at the club. And hopefully none of this is a distraction now, and he's actually delivers on that for us next season, because ultimately that's why we've been so desperate to keep him, isn't it? It's because we're going into Europe and we don't want to lose such someone who's been literally synonymous with our Premier League period and our style of play and everything. So I can see why we've gone down the route of fighting it all the way. Hopefully it now works out for us in the coming season.
I've seen sentiments online, Temps, that we played Spurs, his agent played us, Marinakis played everyone. Who do you think's come out on top here?
Well, between supporting of your football club and the sort of hero worship of individual players, is this network of agents that exist to make deals happen, to move players around, and to earn in the fringes of that from transfer fees and percentages of contracts. So there is always dark forces at work in trying to shift these players like commodities between clubs. But I do think Morgan did generally want to go. I think he had his head turned by a Champions League project at a stadium like that, at a club who are the perennial underachievers, but could put a level of contract on the table that just wasn't there. I think just on the Marinakis point, I really love the way he's parachuted in to fix this. They've been aware of this clause for a long time. There would have been a long period where individuals within the club are trying to negotiate that contract with Morgan within parameters set by the owner. But ultimately, when it came to the crunch, this is a task that he has taken personally. He's jumped on a plane, he's sat down, and within 48 hours, they've got a deal that they're stood there announcing on the side of the pitch after that friendly against Fulham. So I'm not surprised that it took Morgan getting to the brink of leaving for the owner to take on a task personally and authorise a level of spend, a weekly wage that ultimately wasn't there 2 and 3 weeks ago and hadn't been there throughout the summer. And I think just a realisation that in the context of losing Elanga, losing another key piece of our team at that point would have been disastrous, would have led to a rebuild. And this is the most important piece of news in this transfer window because our centrepiece is still there. We're going to continue to build around him. I think we've got him for at least 2 more years now. I've heard the read that he's safe and secure for another year, come what may, with our league position this time around. But I think we've got Morgan Gibbs-White for 2 more seasons. And crucially still, when he leaves, the fee will be on our terms and not dictated by a clause which we'd half forgotten about because he's a very, very different player now to the one that we signed from Wolves.
I'll come back to the where will we be in a year's conversation. Certainly, that was definitely in the notes. I mean, we're assuming again here, Dan, but the wage structure might have been ripped up over the last 3 days or so to make Morgan our highest paid player. I don't know what the figure is, but it's obviously going to be a very substantial one, probably a proper top Premier League player's salary. Are you comfortable with that in minds of PSR and dressing room harmony and everything? Do you think it was a necessary step?
I think if you're going to do it with any player, it's him, isn't it? For the reasons I said before, that he's been so central to where we've got to now. I'm sort of surprised if for him it was all about the wages, if you know what I mean. Obviously, I understand that all footballers want to be on a par with the other players of their kind of quality, and I'm sure when he saw Elanga leave and get that pay rise, that was part of instigating a bit more of a serious push to get this deal done. But I sort of thought maybe it was the other factors as well of going Spurs, like Temp said about Champions League and sort of all the facilities and everything around that. So I'm sure that the wages have softened the blow, and maybe we've had to push higher than we expected in order to offset some of those other factors and really make it kind of an offer he can't refuse at the end of the day. I guess the good thing is with him is you sort of feel like he's always going to perform well, so someone will always be interested in him. So if at some point you think the wages are a bit too high for us to sustain, then there probably is a market for him at some point. And this time, like you say, it'll be on our terms. So ultimately, it pays off if he performs and someone is interested again next summer at 80 million. Then that's a good sign because it's been a good decision for us to keep him, make him well paid, and it still helps us out financially as well as on the pitch, I think.
How come Temps you think he'll be here for 2 more years guaranteed? Because I don't necessarily see it that way. I think we might be back here in 12 months, and I've got no problem with that actually, which I'll get to. But why do you think he's here for another 2 years at least?
Just because of that power struggle of paying the money, to keep him at the club, but also to remove that clause, because it's in the player's interest to have a clause in there that allows the right club with the right level of finance to extract him, irrelevant of the situation. So this hands the power back to us. And whatever happens, if we finish, let's say our range of outcomes next year are anything from 6th to 12th, wherever we fall in that position, we're going to be helped in the recovery the following season by having Morgan Gibbs-White as part of that team. Whilst the finance is nice and he now goes for, let's say, 80, 85 million rather than 60, it's still a really, really difficult position to recruit that level of quality to. I don't think you can replace Morgan like for like. I think more than anybody else, it does enact a complete rebuild, a change in system and improving the players that are around whoever would be in that 10 position. I just think it's such a fundamental part of the way that we play, the DNA of this Forest team in the Premier League, that we have to resist at all costs over the next 2 seasons.
any attempt to remove him from the club, because we fall 12 to 15 points a season without having him in the team. I think that's more than a reasonable assessment of his importance to the manner in which we play. So I would resist at all costs any moves for Morgan Gibbs-White in the next 3 transfer windows. I think he's that fundamental to the way that we play. And look, he does owe us a bit now. We've come to the table with the money, the finance that he wanted. We've given him an endorsement, a public endorsement, that he's the highest paid and the most important player in Forest history at this point in the eyes of this owner. And he has to repay that. He has to continue to do what he's done to this point. There's absolutely no reason why he wouldn't. Not questioning his ethic, as you say. But there is a certain responsibility that comes with being the man, the franchise player at any particular club, and that's the status that he has on his shoulders at this point in time.
Do you think he was that hard to replace, Dan? I mean, we've seen how hard it is to replace Elanga. Morgan they both offer a great deal, but in terms of getting a like-for-like replacement in, if that's what we wanted to do, have we dodged a massive bullet in that sense here?
It's about timescale for me. I think it would have affected this season. I think if you lose him, you're not going to get, especially because you've also lost Elanga and you've lost a couple of your kind of supporting players as well. I think this season you would have stepped back. I just think you'd have to rebuild that attacking relationship, because that was all built over 2 full seasons. Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, and Gibbs-White to get to the level where we got. Because we don't obviously have a lot of the board, they need to be on the same wavelength, don't they? When we do get those chances. So I think this season it would have set us back. I think if it was one of those where we could have recruited, 2 or say 1.5 players for him, one ready-made option and a backup, then in the long run you might think that you can find another Gibbs-White that performs in a couple of years' time. And I suppose as a club like Forest, we have to have that belief as well as keeping hold of the players, I think, because at some point, you look at Isak at Newcastle, at some point, even clubs that are on the next level up from us will lose a big player. So you do have to have that backup plan and that belief in your recruitment as well. But at this point in time, with Europe coming up as well, then I think it makes sense that we need him here for now to try and establish again in that sort of top 10 position in the league as well, I think.
Do we need Evan to answer a question on power dynamics in the Premier League, Temps, or are you?
Evan just ran in his pants looking for his Spider-Man toy, but disaster averted. He's found it.
Good. I'll throw this question at you then before you answer it. The thing about power dynamics is fascinating. With Marinakis in particular, he's taken this whole thing as a real screw you to the Spurs, the Premier League, to everyone you can see. I mean, the fact he was on that with those videos, I've not seen that before on Morgan's shoulder, and it certainly got fans of other clubs talking. But you can see that this was a lot about, like, this was personal to him, certainly, and I think he clearly relishes he's come out on top on this one, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Marinakis doesn't hide what he is, right? Just read his tattoo. He's not going to behave like prey. He's the top dog, top of the food chain. What he says goes. If you're in business with him or against him, there'll be certain times when he's dictating the terms, and that's what he's done to Daniel Levy here. And Daniel Levy, whatever you think as a Spurs fan, is a very canny operator in the manner in which he's established that club in every sense, apart from bringing trophies to the table. And that's because he applies quite a scientific view. Some would say does not seek to overpay for a single thing and prize himself on being a hard negotiator. There was never any prospect of him coming back to the table with a £70 million offer. However, he completely destabilised a star player at Forest. And there came a time when Marinakis saw an opportunity to come in and, yes, with finance, solve a problem that existed that could have been fundamental for our football club. He did take it personally. And this is where, as a fan of the club, you see the power of someone who is not only has an idea, but is willing to back it with personal finance and get a deal done in a very direct, fast, firm, focused way. There's no way he sat there scratching his chin with a Excel spreadsheet of the pros and cons of any particular contract. They've just sat over a table for 10 minutes and just talked about a weekly number. And only the principal owner can do that. He has sent a message, hasn't he? And I know we get kind of mocked by fans of other teams as much as we celebrate the outcome of moments like this, and we've all seen the memes. but there is a pecking order. Dan mentioned Isaac, and I think that demonstrates it very, very clearly. However aspirational you are to move through the tiers in football, that there's always a bigger dog out there willing to give your star player the finance and the conditions that they want. That whole thing's been skewed now as well by the Saudis entering this mad world and offering crazy sums of money for players who are in the very prime of their career. But there are times when you just have to overpay. Perhaps we are paying Morgan slightly more than Spurs offered. Who knows? Who cares? He's that important to us. Marinakis recognised that, and he used every tool in his arsenal to ensure that player remained ours, and showed the football world at the same time how determined and how ruthless he can be when he feels something is of fundamental importance to the continued growth of our side.
Just before we carry on, I should say we normally do these live on a Monday. Obviously, we're recording it because we recorded very early because Temps is kindly doing this abroad. And also, I was worried about the frog sounds on his mic from the other night might return, but we're all clear on that front. Just before we crack on as well, a word for the Trent Navigation. You can watch the final of the Lions tour, the final tests, I should say, on Saturday at 10 a.m. Get your breakfast and get your Guinness there if you're looking for something to do on a Saturday morning. Right. Let us carry on. I haven't got your take on whether we'll be back here in 12 months or so, Dan, and if it matters if we are and all that kind of stuff. What was your take on what Temp said there?
I guess because he's a specific positional player at the minute anyway, he's that number 10. It depends which teams might lose a number 10 that they want to replace that are above us. So I was thinking about this, and maybe if Arsenal feel like there's an alternative to Odegaard, maybe they suddenly come in. We know that every now and then, like with Rice, they're prepared to pay big money for the right player in that sort of area of the pitch. So maybe that comes around, but it all depends on what happens with other teams and whether they lose a player. Will Newcastle come in from at any point if they've got a big pot of money? Well, probably not, because they don't have someone in that role. But if they suddenly change manager and you've got a whole new system in there, maybe they look at him and think, well, he linked up well with Elanga in the past, so we can put a big sum on the table and see if we can pull him away. But it seems like, it's just dependent on what happens specifically at other clubs. It's like a domino effect transfer. Spurs were clearly just trying to take advantage of what they thought, like Temps is alluding to, was a good deal that was on the table. However they found out about it, they felt like they were just trying to exploit that kind of good deal while they could, as opposed to digging in and really wanting Gibbs-White as the specific player that they were after as like central to their future plans. So it's going to be more of a domino effect. I suppose it depends also how we perform next season. Obviously, we've got Europa League, we've got Premier League to manage. Will he be happy if we trend downwards again towards 15th, 16th in the league? Will he start to knock on the door again and sort of ask about the opportunity for a move? I don't know. There's a lot up in the air. So we could be. It's football. We never expected to have him on the radar this summer either, did we? In terms of after Elanga went and it came out of absolutely nowhere. So I'd be daft to try and predict next summer. Can't even predict next week at the minute.
I'll add Temps back in. He was itching to come back in with a point there. Go on, Temps.
Just looking forward to what might happen. Thomas Frank has to go to Madison and tell him, it's not that bad, kid. I'm happy to have you on the side. I need you again now.
Spurs will go out and try and drop some cash on Eze or someone like that. But there's some awkward conversations to be had in that Spurs training ground this morning.
There was some brief frog noises. I think I've worked out how to fix it. I should have just done the thing on Saturday, but all good. So I thought we would be back here in a year, but this was before the thing about the release clause in John's piece and the gentleman's agreement and all that stuff. Even if we are here in a year, at least Dan said about time is a big commodity. We've bought ourselves time to do what we want to do in terms of searching for replacements potentially and all that stuff. Another interesting point we haven't mentioned is he's going to be 26 in January. Clubs tend not to buy big money signings above 26, 27. Some clubs do, like Bayern Munich are buying players. They'll buy Harry Kane, they'll buy Luis Diaz and things like that. But generally, is he... I wonder if he was backed into a corner anyway, signing this contract, Temps. But his age profile is interesting in that he's potentially committing himself to Forest for quite a bit longer, isn't he? I don't know. Am I reading too much into the age thing and the way clubs work, Temps, or not?
We're certainly getting some of his prime years, aren't we? But yeah, I think you do recruit a 26, 27-year-old if they're England's number 10, which is what we all hope and expect. He's come up the rails. He's probably displaced 3 or 4 people who were ahead of him in that pecking order, and there's only 1 or 2 that remain. So I won't use the phrase "appreciate an asset," which I've been battered for in the past, but he's. I think he's going to be worth more in 2 years' time than he's worth now. He's at the same club, albeit in a better team. He's going to be exposed on a bigger stage. I think his England ambition is so much more credible now. If anyone's been under a rock and hadn't heard about Morgan Gibbs-White, they've made their mind up. They've watched the videos over the last couple of weeks and seen what he can do. So I think it's still a battle to keep hold of him for the duration of this contract. But such is the power that we have now with that extra year and the clause removed, we can resist any offer which falls below our valuation. And I just don't see him leaving for less than 75, 80 million pounds now. And clubs will still look at Morgan Gibbs-White in 2 years' time. He'll be in the absolute prime of his career. And look, he may well feel at that point a move's right for him. But it's tomorrow's problem. And for now, he's the heartbeat of our team.
Any additional thoughts on the Morgan situation around the contract, Dan, before we move on? We'll talk tactically and we'll talk other transfers. But anything you want to add before we move on from that?
Not around the contract. I think the World Cup next year is huge. If he suddenly shines in that tournament, then maybe there is another level of interest from some of the big teams in Europe and that side of it as well. So there's that factor, which ultimately now has to be his real focus, and why he probably wanted to get it wrapped up quickly. I do like the timing that at least we've stepped in now and resolved this just about at the kind of point where it would start to probably upset Nuno on the training pitch of it not being resolved. So we've stepped in and done that. Gibbs-White can focus on Forest, and presumably he's thinking, I just want to desperately be in that World Cup squad. And then from there, you never know who might be interested if he really then performs. And it'd just be great for Forest to have an England player at the World Cup, I think, as well.
Let's talk transfers then. It feels like a big week ahead. I've read a report from was it Corriere de Bologna or something like that, where they talked about Dan Ndoye, and the piece said crucial hours ahead. It sounds like he wants to come to Forest. He's agreed. It says there a wage of about 80 grand a week net in that piece, and Bologna are pushing for that final 5 million euros or something takes around 45 million euros. So there's that one, Temps. James McAtee sounds like he's very much on the agenda. Maybe as a Danilo replacement from not a Morgan replacement, if Forest view him as an 8 or a 10 or a central midfielder. So in short, this week feels like, in cricket terms, it's got to be moving week, hasn't it? Is that golf? One of them, moving week anyway.
Moving day 3 of golf. Brody's brought that into cricket, hasn't he?
Sorry.
Yeah, he does mention that on the test comms. Not necessarily. I do think this is going to go to quarter to 12 on deadline day, because we need to bring in a number of players. Dan Ndoye is a bit different. I think he's the guy we've identified as the replacement for Anthony Elanga, and he'll get special attention and is clearly the priority of the recruiting team. And I totally see the logic in that. The numbers quoted seem fair and sustainable. We're not going out there chucking 200 grand a week at players. We can't. And I'm very excited to see what Dan Ndoye can do. I think too, what we've seen from Igor, how are we saying this? Jesus?
Dan, any take?
I've been told it's Jesus, just with a hard J, but yeah.
Okay. There we go. So what we're seeing from him is that he can profile across those front 3 positions in a very different style to what we've already got. But already the backup across those 3, if it is Hudson-Odoi, Ndoye and Wood, Jesus will find a way into that side at certain points. But if he's the first sub for the first game, we've got better backup than we've had. There's still more depth required. So I think that there's an awareness that we need the depth. I think that there will be ins and outs right up to the very, very final tick of the clock on deadline day. But I do see Ndoye as the priority recruit and excited about what he can do. Looks like he's only got one destination in mind, and there's just that little bit of finance required to get it across the line.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two windows going on at the same time to me, in a sense, Dan. Like Ndoye or replacing Elanga, we've got to do, I think, to boost the 11, and we'll talk a little bit about Igor Jesus. And then we need but a few other players in varying degrees of priorities. And I think the timeline is probably a bit longer for, can you get a backup fullback? Can you get a second goalkeeper? But to get an Elanga replacement and get him bedded in tactically for that first game against Brentford, is that more important than the rest will kind of fall into place as we go along? Or with European games on the horizon, do we need basically everyone in place before it all kicks off?
No, I think you're broadly right. I think having that extra winger, right winger, or left winger, I suppose, if Hudson-Odoi switches, is what's missing from us being able to actually build the relationships up front in these pre-season games and in the training sessions. So I think we saw that against Fulham, is that we tried something different with more central players, and it looked all right, but we didn't create loads of chances with it. But I think we did that because we don't really have another option. Jota's part of that B team at the minute as a winger. He's not the guy that Nuno's looking to build the attacking strategy around. So it is essential we get that one done as quickly as possible. I think every week matters with that particular position. And then the rest of them are about value, because we still need to manage the budget. We've made the Elanga sale, but we haven't necessarily got much beyond that, because we're sort of looking at, well, next year we then have to sell another big name transfer, another big fee to kind of catch up. So I think the others we're being diligent on not overpaying for the squad players, which I think is still important. And there are lots of options out there, and particularly as you get towards the end of the window, you never know who becomes available. What we were good at last season with, say, the Elliot Anderson deal is not necessarily knowing where he would play in the team, but just saying, hang on, this is just a talent that's available for the right sort of figure. Let's just get him in and we can work out where he plays afterwards. So maybe it's good to also hold back a bit of money for those kind of deals that might pop up with the likes of Chelsea, or the teams that have just got too many players knocking about the hallways, and maybe there's another couple of deals there. McAtee feels a little bit like that, but I'm sure there's a bit more competition for him because Man City aren't kind of pushed to sell. And fullbacks is the other area, isn't it? Wingers and fullbacks in terms of positional. Like we have no real solid options at fullback for when Aina goes at AFCON, so we've got to target that area.
Just going back to the Morgan thing a little bit quickly, I think you're right, Dan. Something you said there made me think quickly. Two questions, Thames. Do we see Callum Hudson-Odoi sign a new contract now? Is this have any impact on it? And are players thinking, well, maybe we only need to sell one player a year, and this is the wrong phrasing, if I want to get out, I might have to wait my turn a bit longer now, like a Murillo and Anderson, things like that. Well, I just wonder what you think about the knock-on effects and dressing room dynamics and how this plays internally in the dressing room.
I think it improves the chances of Callum Hudson-Odoi signing. He doesn't feel the band is being disbanded now. He can see total familiarity in those that are in and around him, aside from Anthony Elanga. There's just an instinctive feel, isn't there, that he's more prepared to run the contract down and to see what's out there. I don't know why I have this instinct. I think he probably could adapt to playing overseas, and European clubs come into play a bit more for Hudson-Odoi than some of our other players. I think it's recognised too that he is an elite level talent, and it was only injuries that prevented other clubs coming in from him where we did. He's been a fantastic player for us, but I don't think he feels any like dying loyalty to us any more than any other player would or should, for having been his taxi out of Chelsea, where he was surplus to requirements. So my instinct on Callum Hudson-Odoi is no deal close. And his advisors, at least, would probably say to him, look, do what you've done, get to Christmas, then we might have some options for you to talk about. You don't need to jump. You don't need to jump now. He was earning more than Morgan was when he was signed, and he won't be in a particularly bad place with his current deal. And he's so young, isn't he? For someone that's achieved so much in the game and been around for as long as he has, you forget his tender years. Do players sit around and wait for their exit from Forest? No, I don't think so. I think that there's a realisation still with PSR that periodically, once a year maybe, a big player has to be sold. And if Real Madrid come in with the right money for Murillo at the right time, I don't think we would resist that in quite the same manner we have with Morgan Gibbs-White. You can't build your entire team around a centre half, and I think we've all felt that one was inevitable since circa 5 games in. One point I want to make is I don't see any particular player emerging from the pack. I think the players that came to the fore last season and improved so much from within the squad are all known to us now. I don't expect Jota Silva or another fringe player to come and suddenly raise their gears. I think on Elliot Anderson particularly, I just remembered a comment we made after he made his first couple of appearances, and we could see, this lad's got something here. But we were concerned at the time that his position in the side was going to be blocked by James Ward-Prowse. And it's amazing how these things unfold and how quickly things can change in football. But sitting here now, I feel like those dependable, anyone from our best 11 last year that's already there, I feel they've got a level of consistency now, of maturity, of awareness of what this team needs and what the Premier League is like, that they're going to be in the zone at that level. But the improvement needs to come from outside. And Jesus, Ndoye, whoever these additional players that we're going to get through the door are going to be really, really important to that. And just a quick word on the McAtee fee. In the context of Danilo going back to Brazil for more than £20 million, is that not a pretty obvious deal to do, even at 35, 37 and a half? Does that feel like a player of that profile, of that age, let's say signing a 4 or 5 year contract, is going to appreciate in value? I think all of a sudden that looks like a really appealing deal to do. Gives us a utility player and a backup in key positions that makes our bench that much stronger. And he, for me, would be one of the names towards the very, very top of the wanted list at this point.
I'll ask you about McAtee, Dan, in a second and get your take on that. Yeah, interesting points I hadn't thought of there about names emerging from the pack. I mean, Anderson doesn't count. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, Nico Williams is probably internally one who could really find another gear. I think he's got that in him to really do that and become mega valuable. I suppose the other ones like Igor Jesus and Jair Cunha, the players that come in, they're unknown quantities who could be massively worth a lot more in a year or two. And also, I mean, we don't know if other players have got release clauses or not. We don't know how Forest operate, but I'm sure they're very high. I certainly hope they are. McAtee, Dan. So Temps had his say there. Fletcher's high on him. Lewis had doubts on him. I don't know if you heard that one. Where are you at on McAtee?
Yeah, I understood Lewis's doubts at the time. I understand where he's coming from in that it's a very, very different style of play between obviously Man City and here. He would have to be the spark himself. He's not going to be sort of, building play slowly with quality players around him. It's going to be a case of every now and then he's going to have to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and do something like Gibbs-White's done to open us up. But then I went back and watched his sort of highlight reel from his time at Sheffield United, and he kind of did that. There were definitely times when the quality of his play around the box, the quality of his balls into the box created them something from nothing. So when I saw that, I felt more comfortable with that side of his game. And I do think he does fall into the Anderson category of being a talent from good pedigree, good club, that if he's available for a good price, you snap him up and then you work out where you play him, even if you don't have a clear plan. And I think what I like with Nuno is Nuno's very good at that. He will work with the players he's got and he will be able to adapt them. And he seems to, work to the system that suits the players that are available, as opposed to just being a rigid kind of, Ange style manager or company manager where if you don't fit in, you don't play. So I see it as a good move even if it begins with a 30 something. I think if you go above 30, then yeah, it's into record signing territory, and I think your record signing needs to have a clear position in the team and a clear starting spot. So I think we probably are serious on that one. I guess he's just waiting for every bit of interest that comes in to see what his options are at this stage.
Yeah, I think so. We'll talk about another player in that bracket in a sense. Let's just talk quickly about Adama Traore first. We've been linked with him. I don't know how strong we've been linked with him, but people have discussed it a lot. We discussed it in our WhatsApp group, Temps. I'd be very much on board if he was the second right winger, probably. I think he's a good quality player. 29, but doesn't bother me because he's only got a year left on his Fulham contract. Where would you be at on Adama Traore?
Yeah, I mean, look, unbelievable to be signing a player at that level as potential backup. And I think that's the hard sell. I think Traore probably favours a move where he's going to be the man or at least a regular starter. I don't necessarily see him as that, albeit coming to a club that's potentially going to play in the Europa League, have 50 competitive games and require additional players. I just think he probably looks at us versus other offers and considers the team a little bit harder to get into when he can see the moves we're making for Ndoye and the automatic selection of Callum Hudson-Odoi when fit. So yeah, look, I'm not down on him. I think when he was peaking in the Premier League, he was almost unplayable at times. His physicality, the body shape, the olive oil on the arms. He's an imposing figure. But is he going to come in and start for us in the Premier League? I probably see him getting 10 starts out of 38, and I just wonder if he'll have a better option that works more for him. But what a signing that would be, to have that kind of player as the Thursday night man and 20 minutes off the bench at the weekend, if he's willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hudson-Odoi is an interesting factor in this third winger slot, because we've seen he does pick up niggles, and I don't think he can play him too regularly. And I think we probably did, because Nuno didn't have faith in Sosa. So there is an opportunity for someone to come in and still start quite a lot of games. Whether Temp says they're in the Premier League or the Europa League, I don't know. But I thought it was just a different dynamic to this winger search. What do you think about Traore, Dan?
I think the link has obviously come from the Nuno history in the past and the relationship there. And like you say, his contract only having a year left. I'd be surprised. I mean, he might have like a Saudi offer on the table. That might be, perhaps what Temps is alluding to there, that he kind of gets that big money deal at his age, as opposed to coming to Forest, where I see him as a good upgrade on the kind of Jota sub role, which was to come on and cause some chaos, albeit his finishing is the opposite. Like Jota's strength was his finishing, but not the ball carrying and kind of dribbling, whereas Traore is the other way around. But in terms of creating chances for Chris Wood or Jesus in the box, then he's ideal to bring on for 20 minutes and just bash some defenders out the way, basically, and get the ball in the box. And you made another question there in terms of, did you? I'm sure you did, didn't you? You said something else.
I mean, I do very long questions, right?
Yeah,
so
I had a thought in my head and I've lost it now. So
about the extra winger in Hudson-Odoi, I was talking.
Oh, that was it. Yeah. So I still wonder whether Jacob Ramsey's on the radar for that reason. Because he operates on that left-hand side. He can do a bit of a Hudson-Odoi role, but he can also play the 10 as well. So it just comes down to whether we really want to spend that money as well. I know Villa are after 50 million, which is too high. But if he's available for 30 something like McAtee, then getting both of those guys in, I think you've kind of sorted your front line problems there, even for next summer if you have to lose a player.
Yeah, and you've spoken about Nuno wanting versatile players who can play different positions. So I think that's another factor. Just quickly on Malick Fofana, who we were linked with, and I don't know how much was really in it. Me and Temps jumped on a thing when Romano said we'd agreed a deal, and that was shot down, and there was some Texter Marinakis dynamics at play potentially. I don't know if we were really in for him, but again, looks like he might be going to Everton or might be waiting for a Champions League club. So. I mean, if we were in for him, Dan, and we haven't got him, would you be particularly asked or not by that?
That I do remember that episode. That was a classic, like the Saturday night episode as well, which is also a classic where the news is just unfolding as you go. I don't think I think he's a bit. I still think he's a bit of a luxury player for us. Again, coming down to our limited possession and all that, I think he's a bit of a luxury player. I think he can have a magic moment, but I don't think he's a Nuno player as he is now. So. For a lot of money, I would look for a player that's had a bit more proven first team experience in the Premier League, like Ramsey for that side of the pitch, or I'd be going for a cheaper option, down in like the 15-20 million pound bracket. So it would surprise me if he went to Everton by comparison, as that being the current rumor. But I wouldn't be disappointed. It'd be one of those I just have to wait and see. I think he could go either way. I don't think he's a dead cert, suitable player for the Premier League and for a lower echelon Premier League team that's not dominating possession week in, week out.
Yeah, weird fit for Everton. If our doubts around him are around off the ball, then yeah, strange one. I mean, attempts just quickly on it. You did speak about him. Obviously, he does have a lot of assets. I'm sure he's a top talent. But is there a bit of shiny new toy going on about a player when we're all just watching YouTube highlights and we don't really know when we're talking about Fofana?
I'm not down on him at all, but I think Dan's just described the dream window, which would be Ramsey and McAtee in, Silver out for reasonable money, and Sangare becomes the player that we all hope and think that he can be if he manages to remain available for a period of time. If we do that business, then promising youngster from the continent, not required at this point, they would be statement signings. I think the finance might be slightly beyond what we're able to muster. But if we can pull off those deals and sign Callum Hudson-Odoi to a new contract, that's as good as it gets.
People listening or watching, some imminent Temps Junior arrival was cut off short there, very, very swiftly there.
Press mute just before he come running in.
Let's just take a word. I want to switch gears to the tactical side of it quickly. Temps sort of led into that quite nicely. But just before we do, a quick word for Global Telemetrics, and we'll see you in 30 seconds.
Forest Focus viewers, you may have seen what we've actually done over the past year in regards to vehicle theft. You might have those feelings of that it will never happen to me or it won't happen to my car. Did you know that the most stolen car last year was a Ford Fiesta, and Global Telemetrics has noticed a big uptake of thefts in the Nottinghamshire area? Don't be another "it won't happen to me." Drop us an email on how we can protect your vehicle.
Thanks very much, Global Telemetrics, as ever, for their support. Very much appreciated. Do check out the link in the description. Looking at this tactically around Morgan staying, I'll ask you both about this, starting with Dan. I was keen for us to move away from 4-2-3-1. Not that we always play it, but I think there's a real 4-3-3 dynamic at play where we can be more creative in midfield. I definitely think Morgan fits into that. And we've seen Igor Jesus come in, and he looks like, as Temp said, he can play a variety of positions. With Morgan staying, do you think we'll still be 4-2-3-1, him as a 10? Or would you like to see Morgan in a different role with a Sangare, Anderson, Gibbs-White type midfield?
I sort of feel like at the end of last season, we saw a different formation anyway. Although on paper it's a 4-2-3-1, we saw Gibbs-White come a lot deeper. Like you're alluding to there, he almost started to play that 8 role, particularly against that Man City game being like the prime example. He dropped deep. Dominguez pushed on in that wider sort of 8 wide role as well. And we were very, very fluid. So I think we've already become more fluid from what we were the first half of last season, which was purely about structure and discipline. And then we tried to find ways to move the players we've got around to create space to try and obviously create more chances, because we weren't creating a lot in the first half of the season, but we then also lost a little bit of the defensive stability as well in that latter half of the season. So I think we became more flexible there. So I'm not too concerned with like nailing down whether it's 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 for me. I think if you have Gibbs-White, he will float and he will play where he needs to. I think Anderson can do the same, and he tries to link up with Gibbs-White as much as possible. And then it is just about that Sangare role, that partner for Anderson really stepping up to nail down a place, whether that's someone in the squad or whether that's a player coming in. But I think my issue with saying it's a pure 4-3-3 is I don't think Chris Wood plays in a 4-3-3 because he needs someone close to him. He needs a Gibbs-White that's going to get close to him when he needs to pick up those knockdowns and things. I think the teams you see 4-3-3 with, like Newcastle, they have an Isak who can kind of just get hold of the ball and carry it himself into the space he needs to link play. And I don't think Wood offers that. So if we go 4-3-3, you're changing other parts of the team, not just the midfield, I think, to be able to make that work.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I like it. I mean, if we do play 4-3-3 type thing, maybe one of the 3 is Jesus close to Wood or Ndoye close to Wood. I don't know exactly how he plays, even, to be honest. So yeah, that's a good answer. Do weigh in on that, Temps, but also Dan makes good points there about it's a tough challenge to try and evolve your team. We saw at the end of last season we were trying to play a different way, and players were knackered, and we didn't pick up as many points. It's Nuno's obviously got a very difficult job to constantly evolve us to get us where he wants to be, and this summer, part of that might be changing the way we play and changing the formations and making those tweaks. But at least this is like season 2.5 now, isn't it? So we do start from a good base, but thoughts on where we're going as a team?
Well, we start with an attacking chemistry between Morgan Gibbs-White, Elliot Anderson, and Callum Hudson-Odoi in particular that's very strong and can unlock any Premier League defence. The fourth player in that set was Anthony Elanga, and his replacement will determine how many goals we score this season. I think also in central midfield, there's a dynamism now between Gibbs-White, Dominguez, Sangare potentially, and Anderson, and that they know each other's games. They'll cover Gibbs-White if he goes missing. They'll allow him and adapt their own games for him to get on the ball in any third and do what he does. So the nature of 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 is really only important at my level of Sunday football, where lads do one job and he's not what they're doing. It's so much more dynamic in the Premier League. And if you look at the average positions after a match on one of these statistical websites that Dan will be far more familiar with than us, you'll see that whatever the formation is trailed as on the official website, the BBC Sport website or whatever, there's far more subtlety at play. Does Anderson drift to the left? Does Dominguez occupy a kind of defensive wing role? Do we play asymmetrically and focus things through Elanga last season or through Hudson-Odoi or someone else this time around? If Chris Wood's going to be the man again, any game that he starts, he needs to be a true number 9, occupying the last defender, operating within the width of the box, and pretty much staying on point and ready for the cross. I think that if there's any games that Chris Wood doesn't start, that can become a slightly different, slightly more dynamic type of striker who's going to offer more in the middle third, but ultimately not be quite that selfish one-touch finisher that he was so effectively last season. And that's not bagging Chris Wood. I think he was an absolute revelation last time around. But to Dan's point, he's a proudly old-fashioned type striker that requires a certain supporting cast and certain supporting style around him and doesn't lend himself to 4-3-3. So I do still expect notionally a 4-2-3-1. And I think it's Elliot Anderson whose role has to adapt to get the best out of Morgan Gibbs-White, to integrate the wing play in the same manner that we did last season, and give us the best possible chance of just evolving the style that we've had to this point, rather than trying to redesign something off the back of what is really only one key departure. I think that the key is to recruit someone who can continue to profile in the manner in which we played last season, rather than to rip that up and start again and expect different things from our midfielders who were so successful in doing what they did.
Yeah, good points from both of you. I like that. Yeah, I'm sure Morgan Gibbs-White's heat map, if Dan's ever looked at it, would show how hard he is to replace, and his touch map and things like that. He's not a conventional central midfielder, is he? If you're away in, Dan.
No, he's not. I think the formation that we might use more is the back three. You know, whether it's 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 that we kind of saw a little bit against Fulham, because it allows you to rest different players, doesn't it? That's where I wonder if we'll use that for some of the European games, because obviously then if you don't have your 10, you can rest Gibbs-White and you're bringing in a centre-back to use up some minutes for them, whilst you're potentially resting one of your wingers and your full-backs for a wing-back. You know what I mean? So I wonder if you make that change, it actually helps manage the minutes of certain players as opposed to just being like the plan B. So I do wonder if we'll use that more, and that's why we're seeing like 45 minutes in pre-season of each formation to try and bed in some of those second string players into that formation to start some of the European games and that kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah, possibly so. Possibly. We're running short on time, but we haven't seen. Maybe this week's a week where potentially a couple go out as well, like Carmo or Morato or someone. One of them, I do think, will go, even if we are potentially playing a back three, as Dan says. Just quickly to finish, I've wanted to talk about this topic for weeks, and something always comes up because it's Forest. Is signing a set piece specialist essential this summer, Thames, or are we looking at Elliot Anderson being on set pieces or Callum Hudson-Odoi?
Yeah, I really rated Elanga's set pieces, and I was derided by some. I think our record of scoring from set plays was particularly strong last season. I remember Mark Southern talking about that point. Do we need to recruit, or can it come from within? Look, Morgan Gibbs-White thought he was the man on set pieces, but his free kicks and corners were upgraded by others last season. I would hope someone sticks a hand up and emerges from within. But for me, we have lost our best corner taker. And given the size of this Forest side and our track record in exploiting set plays, my preference would be for that to come from within. But we judge a bad corner, we judge a bad free kick quite quickly. And there wasn't anything to suggest that Morgan or Elliott were quite at that level. That shouldn't be a factor in recruiting, should it? I think it should be a fact that there's more than even 2 or 3 players in your side capable of taking a good corner, perhaps having a left foot, right foot that can always give you the in swing. But yeah, I don't see an elite level set piece taker in this set of players at this point.
Yeah, I mean, either they decide that Anderson or Hudson-Ndoye can do it, and it's such a small sample size of data to know if they can, or if they can't, if they're feeling internally they can't, then I think it should be a factor in recruitment if there's someone out there who is a difference maker, because set pieces are such a big part of the game, corners, free kicks. Our dead ball free kicks have been, shots at goal, direct shots at goal, have been crap for years. So maybe there is something that we need to be looking at. You might, I don't know if you've crunched the numbers yourself, Dan, as is your want, but what do you think about this set piece issue?
I think the player we're overlooking in those names is Nico Williams, who does take a lot of set pieces for Wales and will fancy himself as being in that mix with Anderson as the next in line. I think what we're missing there, when you pose this question on the list, I was like, well, what we're missing is a left footer. We haven't got a left footer. That's what I think. Elanga started taking corners with his left foot at some points, didn't he, to try and give us another option. And what you want is variety. So that again points towards McAtee potentially being part of the mix, because he would presumably be happy to fill that role. So yeah, I think we need the variety. I think I've got confidence in Anderson or Williams being able to do a decent job. I think the uptick in set pieces relies on obviously the quality of the ball coming in, but it also needs Milenkovic on the end of it being a bit of a beast in the box, which we didn't have when, say, Gibbs-White was taking the set pieces the season before. So it works a bit both ways. But yeah, for me, I would just love to see more left footers in this team generally. I feel like the left footers always go on to be Forest legends, Pearce, Cohen, Reedy. So we need a left footed legend somewhere in this team, which we're missing at the minute.
I got to shake Andy Reid's hand the other day at the NAF. That was a treat. It was less of a treat. He didn't agree to hang around and say hello to everyone on stage, but it was nice to meet him briefly. I certainly enjoyed that. Right, just before we wrap things up, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add, Michael Temple?
Was Gaten Bong left-footed? I don't think it's an automatic thing.
He was
if
left
you
back.
can... okay.
The centre be a left back.
Yeah, if I just, Dan will put us up on his statistical inaccuracies, but yeah, just to point out, not every left footer that Forest have signed has been a true legend. No, nothing to add.
Well,
cheers,
different kind of legend. Different kind of legend.
Yeah, sliding scale. Anything from you, Dan, before we go?
No, not really. As my only general comment on the Gibbs-White situation is I see the kind of the battle of the owners as kind of a funny thing as a one-off, but I hope it doesn't become like a regular part of football where every time there's a deal, it's like a Levy versus Marinakis or a Saudi versus whoever kind of thing. Hopefully, it's a bit of a one-off, and most deals are done a little bit more straightforward than this one.
Yeah, I mean, I did say right at the start of the show about football parameters and operating in them, and we stepped outside the normal bounds over the weekend. But that does come with Evangelos Marinakis as the owner. I think it's the way he operates, and probably why Forest fans love him so much, because 9 times out of 10, and we'll just finish on this temp, so I'll throw it at you. 9 times out of 10, Morgan does go, and we're having a totally different conversation. This is such a weird one that probably sums up the Marinakis tenure in a way.
Yeah, exactly right. I think 99 times out of 100, the player leaves at that point, and we don't know how close it got. Was there a direct conversation at any point between Gibbs-White and Thomas Frank about how he'd fit into that side? It clearly got a long way down the track before Forest reacted and tried successfully to put things into reverse. But yeah, I'd written him off as a Forest player, thanks to the memories and all that. But I thought that his time had come where the keeping Morgan Gibbs-White at Forest was irretrievable. So true masterstroke, caused by ultimately finance, as I said. But we're going to get at least 2 great years out of Morgan Gibbs-White now, and if we don't, you can play this clip in the future.
From doing a daily podcast is there's so many times you can say you can play this clip in the future and I forget about them all, and they know until some listener drags them out in a few years or something. But that's one of the benefits of being able to say make big predictions, certainly. Right, we shall leave it there. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon or just a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. If you're a member, you'll get early access to this one because it was recorded. And tomorrow's podcast, unless something mental happens, tomorrow's podcast will be with Sam Collins. Really, really interesting interview about a lad who came through the ranks of Forest, played in the FA Youth Cup final, broke his leg, really set his career back, and now he's trying to get it back on track in the lower league. So do check that one out. And then we've got a game on Wednesday, so I have a post-match show for that one against Estoril, I think it is, or something like that. So yeah, should be a good one. Michael Temple, thank you very much.
See you, fellas. 35 degrees here today, so not the ideal environment for a lad from Arnold. So I'm going to go and cream up and find my parasol.
I mean, I'm not having too much pity for you and feeling sorry for you there, but yeah, we do appreciate you doing this while you're away. It's been good to have you. Dan, good. Thank you very much as well.
No, yeah, I'm not giving him any sympathy for that. I'll be sat at my desk, stroking my beard and doing pros and cons on the spreadsheets all day, basically. So instead, no sympathy.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Great to have Dan. Great to have Temps. Do hit like on this video if you haven't already. That does make a big difference as well. So thanks for your company. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.